Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the interview.
Today we are joined by another Conservative MP from the UK, John Cooper, representing the constituency of Dumfries and Galloway. John, thank you for joining us today.
It's lovely to be here, and if I could just pick you up the pronunciation, which is a little difficult.
Dumfries?
So it's Dumfries. There you go. It's
Dumfries,
written
yes.
Dumfries, but it's pronounced Dumfries and Galloway. So that is, for those who know Scotland, it's the bottom left-hand corner, big sticky out bit. It almost touches Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's just 14 miles away across the North Channel, and it's a beautiful rural part of Scotland. Big on dairy cattle. We have a very mild climate, a lot of rain, I'm afraid, but that means a lot of grass, and that means a lot of cows.
Which is, quite a lot of the English countryside, and I guess a bit of the Scottish countryside as well, with a lot of dairy cattle and that sort of thing, being all around the place.
Yes, so most of the Scottish dairy herd is actually in Dumfries and Galloway, so it's a very big industry, and we've got a couple of creameries in the region as well, which make fantastic
And I'm guessing you must be a keen cheese eater, and yourself, or being from
Absolutely, yeah, I'm a big
Dumfries.
fan. I'm a big fan. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's beautiful. So we make, I think, Galloway cheddar, which is, if you can find it, I can recommend it to you. It's absolutely wonderful.
That'd be great if you could recommend to us, and we could probably find some around Australia. Hopefully, I know in Australia we've got Bega Cheese, which is probably the biggest um you know dairy and cheese sort of company here in Australia. But we'll see if Dumfries can compare to it and keep up with
Yeah,
it.
try it out. Absolutely. And one of the things, again, that, around the Pacific Rim, dairy products are becoming much sought after. And it's one of the things I'm keen to explore is whether or not Dumfries and Galloway can start exporting. Raw milk doesn't travel very far. But if you turn it into products, cheese goes around the world. So will dried products as well. So, I'm looking at trying to see if we can expand and get beyond the domestic market.
Which is quite a good initiative from you there, John. So just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you, like yourself specifically, could you give us a little brief description just before we get into the questions?
Yeah, so I grew up in Dumfries and Galloway, so that's where I'm from. So I'm delighted to be representing that area now. My hometown is Stranraer, which is a key ferry port for Northern Ireland. And my background really is not politics at all. I was a journalist for many years, and I actually started straight from school. So I was 17, left high school, and went straight into a local newspaper. And then from there, went through various papers, weeklies, and worked my way up to the Daily Mail, which is one of the country's top newspapers, and then sort of fell into politics accidentally, really. A lot of what I was writing about in the Daily Mail was political, and I ended up as a special advisor with the Scotland office of the UK government. And when my boss there said that he wasn't standing at this election, he suggested that I might like to. So here we are. So I managed to get myself
That
elected.
was Alistair Jack, wasn't he? Your boss at the time.
Alistair Jack, yes, he's the secretary. He was the Secretary of State for Scotland. He's now Sir Alistair Jack. He was knighted recently,
Yes.
and yeah, so he again is from that southwest of Scotland. So he's again a local guy, and it was absolutely tremendous. I couldn't have asked for a better introduction to politics than to work with Alistair because his background again. Wasn't particularly political. He was a businessman, and I really liked his approach to politics because he came at it from that business-like viewpoint. He was all about solutions and answers, and that was a really good lesson for me. I think I hope I bring some of that approach to what I'm doing now.
Hmm. Hmm. And as we were saying previously to the interview, having those sort of different perspectives in politics is really, really crucial. Not always, coming from the same sort of background is really helpful. This is not really helpful in the sense because, you got those different sort of perspectives and experiences in your life can really influence and help legislate and create changes in the UK Parliament that's really effective. And it's as we were saying before, it really does represent broadly the UK people or the Australian people if you're getting more people from different backgrounds and perspectives.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, you need your parliamentarians to represent the public, and the public are diverse in every which way, and that's what you need. And it's difficult. And one of the things that's an issue here, and I'm sure it is in Australia as well, is the cost of having people go down to Parliament and represent their
Mm,
constituency might be far flung. But I'm very clear on that's what you've got to do to have a healthy democracy. You've got to get people in
mm,
from further away. Otherwise, all your parliamentarians will be taken from a very narrow band of people who live close to the parliament and are probably quite well heeled. So
mm.
that's not a good act. That's not what you want. That's not democracy in action. So unfortunately, for those of us who live some distance from Parliament, and I know distances are relative.
Yeah.
To me, 100 miles is a long way. That might not be the view in Australia,
No.
but you've got to price that travel in. So yeah, so I spend a lot of time. I'll spend a lot of time in airport lounges. There's no doubt about that.
Mhm. And speaking of different distances as well, I know there's some Australian MPs. I think Melissa Price, who represents Durack, federally, I think her electorate is the biggest electorate in the whole of Australia. And I was talking to a New Zealand MP, Miles Anderson, yesterday, and we were joking by the fact that the whole of New Zealand is 20 times probably smaller than her electorate by herself. And there's about 100,000 people who live in her electorate, and it's so sparsely populated. So, and apparently, I think he was talking to her a couple of weeks back, and she's got to fly from town to town in her electorate just to meet her constituents. So, it can be quite a struggle to get around and, represent the people, and, being able to get to Canberra or for you to get to London to represent and go to Parliament.
Yeah, I mean and again, these things are relative. So some of my new colleagues represent London constituencies, and they are naturally quite dense. So we represent approximately the same number of constituents, around about 100,000 or so, give or take. But obviously geographically that varies wildly. So some of my London colleagues can get around their constituency in an afternoon. My constituency is probably about 100 miles across. So that brings its own challenges.
Hmm. And would your constituency be one of the biggest in the whole of the UK, or would there be some larger ones?
No, so there are much bigger ones. Yeah, so the Highlands are very big. So the Highland constituency takes in a vast geographical area again, just because it is so sparsely populated. So that constituency alone is bigger than Wales, which obviously is within the UK. So yeah, I by no means am I the worst off. And again, a lot of
Mm.
people have to work with islands, and so again, transport is a difficulty. Again, they've got to go by ferry and things like that, which brings its own
Oh, wow.
difficulties. But the weather doesn't play
Yes.
ball. So
Mm. And there's probably I know probably some inner city constituencies in London which are couple miles big in square
exactly.
miles. So, there is quite
Yes.
a big difference there.
Although my colleagues point out the difficulty of tower blocks and things like that, because when they're delivering leaflets, of course, it's pretty sore to the old knees. So there you go. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. You win some,
Exactly.
you lose some.
Exactly, John. So actually, getting into our questions now. So my first question to you, John, is, how was your high school life? I know you didn't go to university, or you did go university but later on. And do you have any memorable moments you'd like to share on the podcast?
Yeah, so at school, I went, as I say, to a standard state comprehensive in my what is now my constituency, and I had a really great experience there. I was probably a bit too school for cool, in
Mm.
that things like people would slip away at certain periods of the day. I would go to the library and read Time magazine, so I wasn't very exciting in
Oh,
those terms. But having said that, I played drums from when I was about 14, so I played in a series of bands. So I had this kind of odd existence where by day I was this very straight student, and by night I was in this kind of the world of kind of rock and roll, playing in
mm.
pubs and clubs, which I was far too young to be in. So I had this kind of strange mix, which I think it stood me in good stead, and I certainly thoroughly enjoyed it. I had an absolutely great time.
Good. Would you say as well, your time, being a part of the community and going to local pubs as well, really, I guess, helped you in your, career, maybe getting known around the area and becoming, I guess, a community leader in a sense.
Yes, I think one of the key things that it really developed was my kind of communication skills, because obviously I was with people who are that bit older than me. And so you have to comport yourself in a certain way. If you're underage in a pub or a club, then you don't want to stand out. And I
Mm,
think that did help me in terms of just talking to people. And again, it just showed you a slice of the real world. That's how people were living. And schools are kind of odd, sort of every school's the same. It's its own little world, and it was nice to get out into the wider world and see how people were living and how they were getting on. And I say communication was key to that. And that stood me in good stead first and foremost in journalism, because I think key to journalism and key also to politics is listening. You've got to be a good listener. You've got to hear what people are saying to you and take that on board and understand that. Yeah.
And and I guess in all different sorts of in not just in politics, but in all sorts of different sorts of work and in any different sort of career. I guess communication is really, really important. Being able to communicate with colleagues, being able to communicate, with your bosses, and I guess, with staff who may be lower than you as well. That sort of two-way, one-way communication is really, really important.
It's absolutely crucial, as I say. I think in every walk of life, if you can achieve that, and there'll be times in a job where you yourself are all at sea. It's something new to you. It's a big challenge, all of that. So being able to talk to more senior people, I think is a great. It will help you, and I think most people in most businesses want people to get on, to bring people up, to lower the ladder, not pull it up behind them, kind of thing. So people are willing to talk if you're willing to listen. So as I say, I think that listening part of it's is a huge part of the equation. Absolutely.
I totally agree with you there, John. So you did touch on your journalism career in your preamble and also in the previous question there, but we're going to ask a question specifically about your time in journalism, and I think that's with Tobias.
Yeah, prior to Parliament, you worked in j journalism for 30 years with the Daily Mail and many other news companies. Do you have any memorable moments you'd like to share from your 30 years experience?
Yeah, well, thank you, Tobias. So, journalism was a great job. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's tremendous. It's so varied. That's one of the great things about it. You turn up in the morning and you've got a bunch of blank pages, and by the end of the evening, you've got to have a newspaper. So, you have a front row seat in some of the great moments and the historical moments, which is tremendous. And the answer, when people say, "Where were you when a major event took place?" The answer for me was usually in the office, in the newspaper office. So I was there when, the horrible story about Princess Diana dying. I stayed right through the night in the newspaper office there. 9/11, again, we stayed right through the night, just producing edition after edition after edition. So it's a very varied and exciting job, and it was one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah.
Hmm. And additionally, have you seen some differences or similarities from your career in journalism going into politics? I guess, did touch on communication, but were there any sort of differences or similarities that you've been able to pick up from transitioning from journalism now going into politics?
Yeah, so that communication thing is key to both. I think that's certainly the case. But I think as well, your journalistic ability to spot a story. What's a story? What makes a story? What will people want to read? What will they be interested in? That stands you in good stead again as a politician. So you're talking to your constituents, and what are the stories that they're telling you? What are the things that are interesting? Where can you insert yourself? What can you get involved in? What are the problems that they've got that you might be able to drive toward a solution? So I think those kind of journalistic skills are good, and communication skills as well, because one of the things you've got to be able to do as a politician and as a journalist is take very complicated subjects, sometimes
Yeah.
quite controversial subjects, and reduce them down. Make it simple, make it understandable. That's the skill.
Yeah.
And again, the difference between politics and journalism. In journalism, you have power, but you don't have responsibility. So as a journalist, I could write whatever I
Mhm.
liked with speech, which is absolutely wonderful. But I didn't really have to come up with the solutions. What I could do is I
Yeah.
could say, and something must be done. And
Yeah.
then, of course, that's over to the politicians for that something must be done part. So that's the big difference. So now, as a journalist, or sort of former journalist, now as a politician, I've got to think about how we deliver results and how we actually achieve things. And yeah, that's difficult. Of course it is. But we're here for the difficult problems, not for the easy ones.
Exactly. And sometimes with the public in terms of some difficulties as well, they really do talk about, politicians not doing enough and not trying to solve the big issues. But sometimes these issues can be so complex that it can take a lot of time. And, certain decisions they make may only solve the problem in a small bit now, but if those conti if they continue the way they're going, it can really solve the bigger problem into the future.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's not governments of around the world are all the same. they move slowly. That's just the
Mm.
facts. It's very, very difficult to turn things around rapidly. And there's good reasons for that because sometimes a quick decision is not necessarily a good decision. So it
Exactly.
does take time to get things right. And again, we are talking about complex and difficult decision making. Yes.
I totally agree with you there, John. And I was going to say as well, was there any specific media company that you think that you liked the most, or that you liked working for the most in your time in the media?
Yeah, so I had limited involvement with Rupert Murdoch's empire, and that that remains a huge force in British media. But yeah, I really enjoyed working for the Daily Mail. It's quite unusual in that it was really owned ultimately by one family, quite an unusual scenario in the modern era. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was great, and it concentrated on the goose that laid the golden egg, the Daily Mail newspaper. And yeah, it was tremendous. I loved it, and its politics suited me, centre right. So yeah, again, that was a perfect home for me.
And did you spend some time maybe working for, um, I guess more centrist or center left sort of media companies in your time as a
Yes,
journalist?
yeah, I did. So I used to work for a newspaper which was huge in Scotland at the time called the Sunday Mail, and that was owned ultimately by the Mirror Group, and that was centre left, which was fine. As a journalist, you've got to, and I was never a member of a political party while I was a journalist. I felt that was inappropriate. My
Mm.
personal politics were always centre right, and I knew that from an early age. When I was 17 and first starting in work, I knew ultimately I was a conservative, but if you are working as a journalist, then you've got to give both sides a fair hearing, and that's fine. And you don't try and wind any cant into that. You just report things as you see them.
Hmm. Hmm. And I guess in a sense, sometimes it might be easy to represent a media company that you have the same ideology with, but at the end of the day, you just report what you got to report and you give your personal opinion.
Yes,
Um, you
so
know,
there are times in newspapers where you are reporting things, and that's straightforward and that's simple. There are other times where you are effectively expressing your opinion. So when I was working as a columnist, that was my opinions on things, as I say, and I found it very straightforward to write for the Daily Mail and express those centre right views. Yes.
Hmm. Hmm. I totally agree with you there, John. So moving on now to our next question. I believe this with Tobias, and this relates more to your time now in Parliament.
Surely.
Wait, yeah. What has what has been one of your biggest shocks about being elected to Parliament? What is someone you didn't realize happened in Parliament?
So yeah, so getting elected obviously in itself was a bit of a not a shock exactly, but you don't know until the very minute that
It's,
the announcement is made. So that comes as a
yes,
bit of yeah, it's a big moment that you don't know. Even as the count's going on, you get a rough indication, but nothing's guaranteed until and as it turned out in my case until late the following morning. It took over 12 hours to count the votes in Dumfries and Galloway.
it was very
So
close, wasn't
I,
it, in
it,
Dumfries? In
it was very close, yeah. So it was very
mm,
tight, and obviously overall in the UK, it was a grim night for the Conservative Party, my party. So we're down to 121 MPs. So it was a difficult evening, and I was one of those 121 that got through. So yeah, that was really good. I was pleased about that. I was lucky in that I'd worked as a special advisor before in politics, so I'd seen something of the parliamentary building and the parliamentary estate. So that was quite helpful to me. And I think one of the biggest shocks is when you're in the chamber, you're actually in the debating chamber. The noise is absolutely incredible. So people see it on television, and the microphone system is very good at picking up the voice of the one person who's speaking.
mm,
What you don't realize is how much shouting is going on around that person. So it's incredibly loud, and it can be quite intimidating. Yes, so that
mm.
does come as a bit of a shock. One of the coolest things is that each constituency in the members' cloakroom, you've got a hanger and attached to your hanger is a little ribbon. And that ribbon is designed for you to hang up your sword because as an MP, you're entitled to take a sword to Parliament. I don't actually have a sword. I feel that I should perhaps be issued with one. That's maybe something I should take up. But as I say, there is a ribbon set aside specifically for every member to carry their sword. And in theory, the floor of the chamber in the UK Parliament is designed to be two sword lengths apart. So this is designed so that you don't actually get into a sword fight.
medieval sort of thinking there in UK Parliament, and maybe some one of your businesses in Dumfries might have some swords laying around that you could rent and bring into Parliament,
Could well
John.
be. Some of my colleagues are ex-military, and I believe they do have swords, so I shall encourage them
Oh,
to bring them
oh
up.
wow. That can come in handy sometimes in Parliament. If Labour's being too being too farcical on a bill or something, you might have to bring out a sword and
Yeah, the old
and fight
yeah,
them to it to the
absolutely.
death. We're
Hopefully, it
not
won't
going
come to
back
that.
into the medieval times, I don't think.
No, but it's just interesting. And one of the things I do like, and again, as a conservative politician, perhaps not a surprise, I do like all these rules and the old
Mm,
school way of doing things. And yes, you can make an argument for changing it and modernizing it. And Parliament does move with the times, of course it does. But I do like the fact there are niceties and things you can say and things you can't say, and there's forms of address that you're allowed to use and things like that. So I think all that's wonderful.
and we were talking to one of the Liberal Democrat MPs, I think a couple of weeks ago, Luke Taylor, and he brought up one of the one of the I guess one of the more historical ways of how members get to decide what bills they want to bring to Parliament, where you write your I don't know if you know about this, John, but you might have done this a couple of weeks ago, but you write down your name next to a number, and then they put all the numbers into little balls. They put them into a jar, and then they pick out the balls out of a jar, and those numbers and those MPs are the ones who get to bring a bill and a legislation to Parliament for the next 2 weeks or so. If correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so that's the private members bill ballot. So yes, I took part in that, absolutely. And you get to pick a number as long as no one else has taken that number. You pick your lucky number, and it's literally like a lottery, simple as that. So obviously there are other ways of if you have got policy issues that you want to bring forward, you can do that through the party machinery. But obviously that's it can be quite can take quite a bit of time. But the private members bill lottery is good and it's valuable as well because you can bring forward if you've got an idea for something, yeah, you can bring that forward.
Yeah, and sometimes as well, when you get especially if you're new MP and you get brought forward a private members bill and you get chosen, you can get a lot of emails as well from constituents and even people from across the country asking to bring forward something that they want to share and they want to put forward as a
Yeah,
private
so that's
members
one of the
bill.
things you get. So your constituents know when the lottery is coming up. So they will send in suggestions. They'll say, right, look, I want you to go in for the lottery, and if you win it, I want you to introduce this bill here. So sometimes their suggestions are great. Sometimes they're ones you might not be so keen on. But yeah, but I mean that whole process is great, and it's a fantastic way to fast track potentially something, something a little bit different. It's unlikely to be a
Exactly.
major policy change,
Yeah.
but it can be one of the things that was suggested in the Scottish Parliament is an assisted dying bill, and it's a slightly different system. But basically, that's a private member's bill that's moving through the Scottish Parliament. So you could tackle some fairly big issues with that, and the lottery aspect of it feels quite funny and quite quirky. But actually,
Yeah.
there's a serious side to it. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess sometimes with those sort of traditions, they're better to stay sometimes because it's been there for I'm guessing over like 300, 400 years at this point. So sometimes keeping those traditions around is quite useful.
As I say, it's not a surprise that a conservative politician likes the old school way of doing things.
Yeah.
So yes, I like that. And again, there are just quirks, just even the way we vote, where we all press into the lobbies and there's not enough room in there and all of that kind of thing. Again, people say, oh, we should modernize and we should have electronic voting and things like that. I think the old school way of doing it is great, and you physically get counted and things like that. I think that's wonderful.
Mm, mm, yeah. So moving on to our next question. I know you did touch maybe on a politician that you idealize and have a role model for in the past, John with Alistair Jack. But who would you actually say is your political role model or idol? I think you might there's a couple of MPs out there who, I'd assume you'd say, especially from Scotland.
Yes, so I mean, I think again, as a conservative, no huge surprise is that I always think, and again, my distance learning course at university was on military history. So I think Winston Churchill is tremendous. I think his war diaries are really quite something. Ostensibly, it's about the war, but actually, it's about a politician and how he shaped that war and our part in that. So I think he's got a great line again. He's a great communicator. So he's a great line in pithy little quotes, which I think are really great. And I think Margaret Thatcher as well. Margaret Thatcher was PM when I was growing up, and I think there's no doubt about it that controversial figure, absolutely she was, but she transformed the UK, and we're talking about affecting change and politicians affecting change and how difficult and slow that can be. But looking back, Margaret Thatcher achieved a tremendous amount in a tremendously short
Mm.
period of time. So I think obviously both of those I would like to think shape my thinking. I don't think I'm quite in the same league as either of them, but
Mm.
certainly yeah,
You
shape
could
my
be in the
thinking
in the
quite
future,
a bit.
John.
Well, I think unlikely. As I say, we are going through a leadership election at the moment for the Conservative Party, but I'm not throwing my hat into that particular ring, no.
Maybe down the line if hopefully we'll see how 2029 goes along. But if another opportunity comes along, John, maybe you put your hand in the ring and become.
Yeah.
I don't think the Conservatives ever had a prime minister from Scotland.
So I think we had one very briefly. Alex Douglas Hume, I think, was a brief prime minister, and he was from Scotland. So I think that's about that. Tony Blair was born in Scotland, although I don't think he
Yes.
really regarded himself as Scottish. So yeah,
No,
so
no,
there you go.
I think that Gordon Brown represented the Scottish
Sorry,
constituency.
yes. So Gordon Brown. Sorry, yes. Absolutely forgot about Gordon Brown. And Gordon Brown was PM as well, and is very much Scottish. And I've met Gordon Brown on quite a few occasions. I met him when I was a
So,
young reporter as well.
oh,
So
okay.
yes, I found him quite a difficult character. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I was
I
working for
mean,
one of those
d
centre left part pit newspapers that should have been on his side, and he was
mm,
quite. Yeah, he wasn't exactly very helpful. But anyway, that's how it goes.
it's the
Maybe it was
trade, I
just
guess.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on now to our next question then for you, John. This comes from Tobias.
Yeah. My question is, what made you run in the 2024 UK election for the Conservatives, and what made you join the Conservatives?
Okay, so for a long time, I wasn't actually a member of any political party. As I say, as a journalist, I felt that it was inappropriate to be a
Mm,
member of a political party. However, my thoughts always were on that centre right. That was always the way I voted. And I probably, as I say, from the age of 17, kind of knew that really conservatism was the way forward for me. I got picked up from journalism and went into the world of politics as a special advisor. And that's the point at which I joined the Conservative Party because I was working for a Conservative minister. So at that point, obviously, it was clear that that's the way I wanted to go. I didn't really have any ambitions or any thoughts about seeking elected office. It wasn't something that I'd ever thought about. As I say, I was a journalist for a long time. When I became a special advisor out the blue, Sir Alistair Jack said that he wasn't going to stand at the next election and said to me, would I consider standing? And that really was the first time I'd ever thought about it. I was quite incredulous. I did say to him, are you joking? And he said, no, I'm really serious about this. I think you could do it. And his faith in me, I hope I've fulfilled that. It was great of him to suggest it. And here I am, as I say, I'm an elected representative for the Conservative Party.
Hmm. And I guess as well, as you were saying, it was quite a nervous night when you got elected, waiting for the ballot results. And I'm pretty sure um Dumfries and Galloway has been quite a marginal constituency, especially between it used to be SNP held, I think, before Alistair Jack in 2017. So it's always been
Yes.
quite a marginal constituency in the past.
Yeah, so it's kind of changed. I mean, the boundaries have changed, which has kind of changed the MP that's been sent up. But for a long time, when I was growing up, it was Conservative. Then it was Labour for a long time, and then the SNP held it for two elections, and then Alistair Jack held it for a further two, and now I'm the third Conservative now. So it has chopped and changed. Yes, no doubt about that, and that's reflective, I think, of Scottish politics. Scottish politics have been through quite a big sea change. At one time, Labour held dominance, and then the SNP surged, and they've fallen back a little bit now, and we see Labour coming to the fore again. So it's been part of that. And as I say, on a difficult night for the Conservative Party, I was delighted to come through. The margins were tight, no doubt about that, and it was a long and slow count. We didn't go to a recount, but it was a long and slow count. So on a personal level, it was quite nerve-wracking. But one of the things that I think about Scotland is there's a lot of blue-collar conservatives out there, people who are actually conservative in that the way that they live and the way that they think. They want to work hard, they want to do well for themselves, they want to do well for the next generation as well. But they might not think of themselves as conservatives. So that's the challenge for us: is we need to tap into those people and do right by them.
Because quickly I think in history as well, Scotland and even Wales for an extent has always been quite a difficult territory for conservatives. I know in Wales, they've never currently they don't hold any seats anymore in the Conservatives, which is quite sad. But previously, they've never been in government there, and really in Scotland's been really an SNP versus Labour sort of territory home
Yes, in the modern
country.
era, it's certainly been that way. But again, this is one of the challenges that we face now as conservatives. We've got to have a period where we're picking our new leader. We've got to have a period of introspection. We've got to think about all of that. But one of the things I think that we do is that we don't abandon our core values. We stick to those. Yes, we've had a hiding at the ballot box. Can't ignore that. We've got to think about why that happened. But we still have certain common values, and I think that those values speak to a lot of people right across the UK. As I say, we are about ambition. We are about trying to bring people forward and trying to help the next generation do better than the current one.
Which are great, noble, and I guess a lot of initiatives and things that a lot of British people in the past would have really, really appreciated and still will into the future.
Yes, I mean politics is there are swings and roundabouts in politics. The pendulum swings one way and then the other, and we're in a period, as I say, where we're now in opposition. So we take that opportunity to reset, to rethink, come back with policies that are relevant to people's lives, and that we think will have broad appeal.
And my final question, actually, to you, John, is what's some advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who might be starting university and high school? I know up in Scotland, a lot of some of your constituents who'd be starting university and high school around this time of year.
Yes, that's right. So my son is one of those. So he's just starting university. He's moving out of high school and going into university. So yeah, I think again it comes back to communications. Be a good listener. Soak up everything you can. Take every opportunity you can. Try stuff. Don't sit in your room doing nothing. Get out there, try and talk to people, and just shape your thinking. And if it's politics you want to go into, great. It's a wonderful, difficult life. Yes, of course it is. And by its nature, you will face criticism, but that you've got to be able to stand up for that. So do that. And but whatever line of work you're trying to get into, give it your best shot, as I say, and you will find senior people who are willing to lend you a hand, listen to their advice.
And at the end of the day, if you don't know exactly what you want to do, if you want to get into politics per se, having those sort of good, strong peer mentors, as you did with Alistair Jack, is really, really crucial, as you said, to at least find, because going into politics, if you don't have really anyone there around you, it's quite a difficult sort of area to pick yourself up and keep going because, you do face a lot of challenges and difficulties over time. So at least having those sort of mentors and those strong people around you can really help you through those tough times and make you a better politician, a better human being at the end of the day.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think you'll find that parties are like teams. There's a team
Yeah.
of people there, and you'll find a lot of like-minded souls who, as I say, want you to do well. You want them to do well, so that's mutually beneficial. And that classic thing about not knowing what it is you want to do, I went throughout my career not really having a roadmap, not a plan. If you told me 30 years ago I'd end up as an elected representative, I wouldn't have believed you. Life just throws things at you. There's turns and twists in the road, and it's great. Enjoy the ride.
Exactly. Enjoy the ride and, enjoy what's coming up in life because you never know. That's the excitement of what life is because everything is up in the air. You don't know exactly what's going to be happening next. So enjoy the ride and enjoy the present and hope the best for the future.
Completely, and there will be disappointments, there will be setbacks. That's as much a part of life as successes are. But ultimately, you'll get where you're going, and you'll enjoy it.
Exactly. So yeah, those are all our questions then for you, John. I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast, especially after quite a busy sitting week. I remember watching you ask a question in question time, I think 2 weeks ago or so, during Scottish questions. So, Parliament can be quite busy. So I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and speaking to us about your career before politics and journalism and some advice you'd give to students, especially those starting university and high school.
No problem at all. It's absolutely wonderful, and I'm glad that you're interested in what's going on over here.